Hello art stars, we've got a really fun lesson for you today. We're going to be creating our own brass rubbing print. And brass rubbings are a really old way of printing. They used to create these big sort of plaques where they would sculpt and relief the print in, and then the paper would get laid over and the color would get rubbed on, you know, sometimes with natural waxes, sometimes with other mediums, to get the texture below to come through in the paper. And that's what we're going to be doing today. But because we don't have big brass plaques to use, we're going to be creating our own motif with found objects around the house. So I want you to go on a scavenger hunt, and after I show you what I found, maybe you can pause the video and go get yourself some inspiration and some supplies around your house. Maybe ask your parents to help you find some stuff and get experimenting. So I've got some paper clips, lots of change from different countries, different sizes, different shapes. I found some washers, these teeny tiny little torques here. I've got a blister pack of my antihistamines because I've been taking a lot of those, so I've got a few of these laying around. This necklace I thought might give a cool structure. And then I had this little flap that fell off a shoe. And you'll notice all my things have something in common. They're all quite flat and hard. So soft things have a limit, and when you're pressing, they kind of squish down and don't really transfer as well as something that is hard. We also have string, and when string is, you know, go at the slightly on the thinner side, this is a great thickness of string. You can lay and create your own sort of design and then rub in, and it's a great way of creating maybe a shape that you can't find in your objects. I went down to my kitchen and found this spoon that has all the holes, and I thought that might be really fun, as well as a fork. I got some zip ties that I found laying around. And what we're going to do before we create our prints is we want to sample our things that we got and see how well they transfer onto paper. So as you can see, I've laid down paper clip and a few of the coins. And I started with my pencil, just rubbing over the shape. And so I'm going to grab a few different ones now and show you what I mean. Let's try the zip tie. I'm going to lay that in. And then you start rubbing with your pencil. And some objects might be trickier than others. Some might show more texture than others. I love the coins and the pennies because I think sometimes you get a bit of that lettering and motifs come through and it looks really cool. But this zip tie is working pretty well too. You see all those little, all these little grooves come through in the texture. I don't know if you can see very well in the camera. All those little lines coming through. I'm going to try my spoon next because I'm really excited about that one. And with these, I guess my fork and my spoon aren't quite flat objects. So what I'm going to do is lay it face down so that it's not moving much, because if I lay it this way, it might just move all around and make it a bit more difficult to trace. So we're just going to lay our paper and try not to crimple the paper too much. Oh yeah, and that's a great texture coming through. That one's pretty cool. I think that's one of my favorites so far. Let's try the fork. And the same thing with the fork. I'm gonna lay it face down. And this might be my trickiest item that I have here because the shape is quite challenging for it not to move around and not to ruin my paper and just crimple it all over. So if you've chosen a fork like me, be extra gentle on that one. But that creates quite a cool line. And I think what you definitely don't pick up in the camera is the texture. And I think that's one of my favorite things about this technique is that when you touch it, you really feel the relief of where the object was laying underneath. Let's try our little tab. Gonna lay that there. And this, similarly to the spoon, works quite cool, but it's a different pattern. If you notice, the polka dots on here are kind of alternating, whereas here they're all in a straight line. So it's kind of nice to have both textures to play off of. Let's try the funky necklace. And for this, you'll notice I grab my pencil sideways because it's easier to grab it this way and press with your finger slightly down on the tip to get the rubbing to come through. Oh, and this works pretty well as well. It's interesting. And because it's my sampler, I don't mind if some stuff kind of starts crossing into each other. I think that's quite a nice texture, isn't it? And last thing, what have we got? Our little shoe flap. Let's try it here. And you'll immediately notice this one, because it's not metal, it is a little bit softer than the rest of my items. And it creates a different look. It's a lot more subtle. And you can see that the lines become a bit more shaded and mixed. Because it is slightly squishing down. So it's a bit more in the background, that motif. So I'm not sure how I'm going to use this yet. But now that you've got your sampler, we can grab our colors and start making our first arrangement. So you can use your oil pastels, which I think work quite well. If you want to mix it up and get different materials going, you can also use some wax crayons if you have. You can use the pencil crayons because, of course, the colored pencils will work just the same as your pencil does. So that would be the closest to this texture, I guess. But I'm going to go ahead and use the pastels. And for our first arrangement, I want to try and create a little motif that we can repeat and create a pattern kind of like when you have on clothing, you know, you have one flower that will go in several places. That's what we want to try and create with this. So I think I'm going to start with some coins. Maybe make a sort of a flowery something. Maybe use all my washers here. Here, great, I've got another one. Let's find a smaller coin than this one. Maybe the 20p. Oh, that works quite well. And maybe I want a little stem to my flower. So I'm going to go ahead and slip this sort of under the coins here. Maybe I go all the way across here. And so that's going to be my motif. I am going to take my paper and I'm going to grab a color, this reddish pink. That's lovely. And start rubbing. It's going to be tricky, I think, especially if you have things that are different thicknesses, to get your paper stable. You can always grab a bit of masking tape if you've got some laying around, and tape down the corners of your paper, and it frees up one of your hands to kind of maneuver this a bit more. And so now that I've got my motif in one color, I think I want to introduce a second one. So I'm going to go ahead and grab maybe this orange. That's quite nice. And create it maybe going, I don't know, in this direction. So when you've got a repeat pattern, excuse me, it's important to look at the flow of the repetition. And quite a common combination is to do almost like a square. So you would do all four corners and then one motif straight in the middle. Oh, I think I missed one here. Let me see if I can kind of try and center that in. Yeah, get our last one in there. I missed it with this pink as well. I might come back and try and rescue this last petal because I didn't realize. And this is actually quite tricky to realign. You don't want to move this too much around. Let's go over to this corner. And what I might do is get my stem going the other way for my second repetitions. So that it crosses here. Let's see, let's use maybe a nice purple here. You'll notice I try and pick sort of one coin and lay my finger down there, and then I kind of stabilize the paper with my other two fingers. And that's just to keep it from moving around a bit too much. Lovely. And our fourth one, I think I'm going to keep the purple for this one. Oh, yeah, that's moved there. If you find that happens, it moves, just gently try and replace it where it was. If it doesn't quite come out the same way, no biggie. Oh, see, that one's shifted again. It means I don't quite have my paper stable enough. That shift it back into place. There we go. And because I'm using soft pastels, it's a bit more powdery. Yours should be slightly clearer than mine. And so let's go in. Oh, this has moved a little bit. Let's just rearrange our circle and go in for our middle. And I think I'm gonna come in with maybe the reddish one again. And so find one that you feel is stable enough. There we go, 3 fingers. I can hear some jingling here. It means a couple of my motifs have moved, but that's all right. There we go, and you slowly start getting a repetition going. So that's going to be your first challenge. If you want to pause again here and get that one done and then carry on with our second challenge, you're welcome to. If you want to look through all the challenges and then create your own, carry on watching. So our second one, I want to try and do an abstract. An abstract, what I love about it is that you can kind of just empty your mind a little bit. There's no real rhyme or reason. I'm going to start layering things a certain way just because that's what I felt like doing. And sometimes the less you think about it, the better it is with abstract. Okay. So I'm going to grab one of my smaller ones, I think. Let's see. I might need to bring this in here. And with this one, you might want to have some fun with relayering things. So I'm going to go in with the blue this time. And I'll show you what I mean. Because just because you've arranged stuff in a certain order doesn't mean you have to keep it that way. And I'm going to go in with blue here. Ooh. And maybe come in and grab this guy, slightly lighter color. And you see this one with a soft pastel isn't really showing up as much anymore. So it might be that I just use this as a background and come in with my pencil, because I know that one's definitely translating. So don't be afraid to layer the color like this. Or if you're not happy with that texture, relayering something else on top. And melding one texture into the next. I feel like I want a bit of my zipline paper clips here. And maybe this orange is going to come through here with the paper clips and the coin. And so you slowly start layering. And so maybe I want to rearrange here and bring in this orange kind of, I quite like how that looks, so I'm going to bring it over on this side as well. And then if I feel like I've lost a bit of definition on this one, maybe I bring in the pencil again, or I bring in a secondary penciled color. And there we go. I wasn't picking it up because the paper clip has moved. And now we really get that texture coming through. And really you can fill this whole page with layered objects, and it'll give you a great impact abstract. For our final piece, I want to create a figurative painting. And figurative prints are things that are based on or inspired by a real thing, but they're not a realistic representation of it. So think of it like cartoons. When you've got people in cartoons, they're based off of you and me, but maybe, you know, the head is twice as big as the body. The proportions are really unrealistic, so that's what makes it figurative. It's suggesting that this is that thing, but it's not a realistic impression of it. So have a think of what you want to make. Maybe, you know, I'll bring my sampler back, and I think that maybe to me this looks a bit like a vase. And from my repeat pattern, I know that the coins make quite pretty flowers, so maybe I'm going to make a little vase with some flowers coming out of it. So I'm going to use this one portrait, and maybe we can use the chain to kind of make lots of stems here for our flowers. So take your time sort of layering the stuff and placing it in a way that you like it. I might bring in the string for this one. And just kind of create little loop-de-loops that go around. And again, I'm trying to be quite free with this, because sometimes when we feel it more than think about it, great images come through. So let's do little flowers here. Let's use all kinds of sizes. And let's do one more here maybe. That feels a little bit lower than the rest. I'm going to do this one. Okay. And to me, that's my vase with flowers ready to go. So again, I'm going to lay my paper, and this time I'm going to use the wax crayons just to show you what different materials come through. Let's see, we're going to use a bit of this green. Let's use a bit of this one as well. Let's get some more pink flowers and maybe some blue flowers. There we go. I think maybe our vase is going to be blue. That sounds like a good idea. And you can get quite sort of excited doing these movements. Just, I had to remind myself there to slow down a little bit so that my paper's not flying all over the place. And you can see here where there's different levels of texture, it becomes a little bit harder to manage the paper. So just be gentle with that. Let's get some of our green going here. Our lovely pink bouquet. And that's coming through, and can you see, because this one's, it's much less powdery, the design stays a little bit cleaner. And let's feel out some of our string around here. And depending on what you're mixing is how much pressure you want to apply. So with the string, I'm applying a little bit more pressure because it's a lot lower down than the rest of it. It'd be a little bit harder to pick up. And I'm gonna do the same with the chain here. I'm gonna come in with a second green and just remark this a little bit. Lovely. And there we go. We've got our figurative print with a relief on it. I can't stress how much I love the texture about doing this. So have fun with it. I can't wait to see what you come up with. And I'll see you in the Zoom session. Okay? Bye, Art Stars.